Good evening and welcome. We're just a couple of minutes past 7:30. I think we have a number of participants who have already joined us, so welcome everybody. My name is Sujay Galen. I am the chair of the Department of Physical Therapy here at Georgia State University. This evening, I will be serving as your moderator as well as a member of the panel. And in this seminar this evening, we are going to be talking about a collaborative research through systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And as people are joining in still, I am going to give a little bit more time in the first couple of slides so that people don't miss out on the content. This session is being recorded. And if you have any questions, please do wait till the end of our presentation. Our plan is to wrap it up in about 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. So we have about 20-25 minutes at the very end for some good discussion and Q&A session. And if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation that you would like to not forget, you can put it in the chat box. And at the very end, we will go through those questions. I would say thanks to all of you for those of you who have put in your questions earlier, because that helped us actually design this presentation in such a way it actually answers the questions for you. So without further delay, I just first of all would like to introduce you all to our Georgia State campus here in downtown Atlanta. For those of you who may or may not know Georgia State, we are located right in the downtown area. In fact, this October, when there's going to be the Education Leadership Conference here in Atlanta, your conference site in the Hyatt is just about a 10-minute walk from our campus and from our department. So the skyline here that you see is the downtown campus skyline. And I welcome you all, if you're in the area, to come and visit us and to get to know our campus. And joining me this evening are three of my colleagues. First of all, I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Gordon Warren. He is a distinguished university professor in the Department of Physical Therapy here at Georgia State University. And he is also the technical advisor on the systematic review and meta-analysis program here at Georgia State University. Gordon, would you like to say a couple of words? Perhaps not, or I'll move on to our next panelist, who is Dr. Anjanette Nunez. She is an alumna of our program, and she currently serves as the Director of Clinical Education at Emory University, who are also our neighbors here in Atlanta. And Dr. Anjanette Nunez was a student in our program who did a systematic review, so she'll be providing the student perspective. Dr. Nunez, would you have a few words?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Nunez. And our third panelist is Dr. Kimberly Morelli, who is a clinical professor and she's also the program director for our DPT program here at Georgia State University. Dr. Morelli, would you like to say a few words?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the interest in this topic, and looking forward to hopefully presenting you with some new information.
Thank you, Dr. Morelli. And I've introduced myself already, and I'll be the moderator and part of the panel. So first of all, I'd like to give a quick and a brief introduction of what the research requirements are at Georgia State. So the research project, which is part of our curriculum, encompasses about 11 credit hours. So it's a very integral part of our program, which is about 144 credit hours in total. And students in the DPT program can choose one of two pathways for their research project. They can either choose a hypothesis-driven clinical or non-clinical study. An example could be a feasibility study in a clinical environment, or it could be a device that is being introduced into our profession that we're trying to evaluate or validate. It could be any of those type of projects, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. The second route is a systematic review and meta-analysis route, which most of our students do pick it up. So our program has a total of 44 students. So every year, between 12 and 15 students out of that 44 will choose to do a systematic review and meta-analysis. And our research groups are about 2 to 3 students in each group. So we get roughly, on the whole, about 10 to 12 groups. And of that, maybe 5 to 6 groups are actually research groups doing systematic review and meta-analysis. The topic of the systematic review is from anywhere that's related to a PT topic. And usually it's picked by a kind of collaboration between the research student and their mentor. So why do we have this systematic review and meta-analysis? It partly is because of the research requirements in our program, which I've listed here on the slide. All of our students, in order to graduate, will have to meet one of these three end goal, if you like. So it could either be a submission of a manuscript to a peer-reviewed journal at the end of their research project, or they will have to work with their mentor in developing a grant proposal for external funding. And finally, they have to present their work at two conferences. One could be a local or a state level conference. Another could be a national or international level conference. And we usually ask these presentations to be somewhat different to each other. So they will have to meet these requirements in order to graduate from our program. Now, this may be different to a program that you're from, and we understand there's a huge variety of research requirements across all of the different programs across the country. So with that in mind, I would just like to talk briefly about our DPD PhD program, because the systematic review and meta-analysis also forms a core part of that DPD PhD program. In our department, the PhD program is actually based as a collaboration with the Department of Kinesiology here at Georgia State University in the rehab science concentration. So for example, one of my DPD PhD students right now, what they're doing is a systematic review and meta-analysis part of their DPT program, which then kind of feeds into their PhD work. So this kind of leads on, if you like, beyond their 3 years of DPD to complete their PhD between 2 to 3 years. So in total, it's a 5-year or 6-year program that they do a combined DPD PhD, which is kind of similar to other DPD PhD programs that are offered around the country. So how did this systematic review and meta-analysis program actually evolve? Like I said before, it started off with that stringent research requirements that we have in our program. So students who are coming to our program select us because we are a Research One university, and also we have these research requirements. So we make that very clear up front to students who are enrolling in our program that these are the requirements. And most of them are very motivated to go down that research path. And once the students are enrolled in the program, they can then take a course that actually Dr. Warren, who is with us this evening, actually runs that program. It's a 2-credit-hour course. I'll talk a little bit about it later. But they take this program as part of their curriculum, but also faculty can take that course as well. So Dr. Warren offers that at 2 different times during the academic year, once during the spring semester, and another time it's offered in the summer, especially for faculty to participate in it. And it's a 3-credit-hour course in summer for the faculty and for anybody outside of the university or outside of our department to participate in that program. And most of our clinical faculty will be choosing the topic for the systematic review and meta-analysis, and they also serve as a content expert. So at the very beginning of the DPD program in the fall semester, which is our 2nd semester, we offer all of the research that's currently going on in the department, including topics for systematic review and meta-analysis. And sometimes some of our students will have topics of their own, and I'm sure Dr. Nunez will share a little bit about it. And then it's kind of a collaborative effort between the faculty, the students, and their mentors to work together in the systematic review program, if you like. And the research questions development, this is the key part of that. And we will talk a little bit about the process of the systematic review, but key to that, right at the center, is developing that research question and setting up a preliminary search. And we're looking at the feasibility of actually setting up a systematic review and meta-analysis. What I mean by that is when Dr. Warren teaches a course, the students are encouraged to start searching for the literature, and they will have to identify at the least 5 papers that could be part of that systematic review and meta-analysis. And then if it's not at that level, then we may have to either narrow or expand the research question depending on how our search ends up. And then we need to include more papers into it. And at the end of that course that he teaches, maybe with 8 or 10 papers, they perform a mini systematic review as a starting point, and then they launch on with a systematic review and meta-analysis. So what's been the output so far? Like I said, the program has been around for 10 years so far, started in 2010. And every year, 10 to 15 students has been taking this program. and 5 to 6 student groups have a topic each, if you like. And so far, it has resulted in more than 30 conference presentations. And we have had more than 14 peer-reviewed articles that have been published to date. So it's been an extremely successful program so far. And the course itself, the way we have set it up here at Georgia State, it's a 2-credit-hour course for our DPT students to start with. But then in the second year, in the spring and summer, they do have to register for another 2 credit hours as part of their research practicum. That's when they're actually performing, if you like, those systematic review and analysis. The objectives of the course pretty much are for them to be able to come up with a research question and then formulate what is called, as you all know, a PICO question. And based on that, establish search criteria. And then the search itself happens in partnership with their mentor, but also with our librarian here at Georgia State University. And when we are going to provide the resources for this talk later on the ACAP website, we will provide you with links to our librarians' resources here at Georgia State, but also at other universities that we have identified. So you can use those as resources to develop your own program, if you like. The topic in the systematic review course starts off with how to formulate a research question, search criteria, but then very quickly dives into the statistical part of it on how to run a meta-analysis, how to extract data, how to put it into the software, which I'll talk about shortly, called the CMA, which develops all the forest plots for us and does all the analysis for us. And this, as I said, starts in the very first year of the DPT program, and they have the entire DPT program, not only to complete their systematic review, but also to go ahead, present, and disseminate their findings. And I know one of the questions that was posed to us is, what's the difference between a scoping review and a systematic review? In a scoping review, pretty much the meta-analysis part or the statistical review is not present, but it's very, sort of all-encompassing, where we are trying to address a research question and provide the evidence and evaluate the evidence. But what may be different to a systematic review is in the meta-analysis part, we actually do a statistical evaluation of the data that we have extracted from all the different papers that we have identified, if you like. And a little bit about the role of the technical advisor. Dr. Warren serves as our technical advisor here in our program, but within your programs, if you do not have one, please do get in touch with us, because one way to become a technical advisor would be actually to participate in a training to become sort of proficient in doing systematic review and meta-analysis. And so the role really of a technical advisor, at least in our program, the way it works is Dr. Warren works very much hand in hand with our faculty, mentoring them, because our faculty are the content experts, if you like. But in terms of actually doing the analysis, doing the search criteria, all of that, Dr. Warren provides a lot of input in there in establishing those search criteria. And also in mentoring students, Dr. Warren helps with the extraction of data, or how to actually set up. So we have like a template where we can extract the data and fill up the Excel sheet first before we actually transfer the data into CMA. And then once it's in the CMA software, then of course the course teaches them how to analyze that data and develop all the analysis using the CMA software. And finally, Dr. Warren's role as a technical advisor is to provide us statistical advice and also advice on how to handle the data that's been extracted. So in your packet that will be posted on ACAP's website, we will provide you links to all of these software website, if you like. The CMA software, which is comprehensive meta-analysis software, that's available on that website that's shown on the screen here. What that software allows us to do is to extract the data and then run what is called a forest plot that looks at the effect sizes and shows that on a presentation like the one shown on the screen. This is what you would see in most of the publications that you may have come across so far in doing a systematic review and meta-analysis. So with that, I am now going to pass it on to my colleague, Dr. Nunez, to talk to us about the roadmap of how she got going on with the meta-analysis to a publication. Over to you, Dr. Nunez.
Thank you, Dr. Galen. So starting out here with a screenshot of the end result publicized in the World Journal of Meta-Analysis back in April of 2015. Maria Corelli, Carrie Smith, and I worked together beginning as first-year students at Georgia State And we were fortunate enough to have Drs. Morelli and Warren serve as our faculty advisors. Just a few more details about that SRMA. It was unique in that prior systematic reviews, specifically on patellofemoral pain syndrome, at the time did not include any meta-analyses assessing exactly the effects of hip exercises on patellofemoral pain syndrome. And it's a little joke here. It was a proud moment when I actually announced this publication to my family members. I think my mother-in-law's response after reading the title was, oh, that sounds like a page turner. So it's an ongoing joke now about research, but definitely very proud of this publication, happy to have worked on it. And thinking about how we first began way back as first-year students, I remember beginning with the question of do hip abduction strengthening exercises actually improve patellofemoral pain syndrome? And it wasn't a very good question to start with. The independent variable, now we know now, was too narrow. And so we had to expand hip abduction strengthening exercises to the addition of hip strengthening exercises to traditional PT. And our dependent variable of improving patellofemoral pain syndrome, we really had to narrow that down to solidify whether it increased function or decreased pain in patients with patellofemoral pain syndrome. And then we defined our inclusion and exclusion criteria based on subjects, the treatment and control group intervention, specifically if they identified hip muscle group strengthening. Outcome measures, as I said, focused on pain or function. And we really needed to look at the quality of the study that we included, whether or not they were randomized control trials and published in a peer-reviewed journal. Next slide, please. And so looking at what was expected of us as students, really clearly defining a topic and selecting a relevant topic was very helpful. While we were classmates, Carrie Smith and Maria Corelli were both and are still actually highly active in the triathlete and mountain biking world of racing. And I was too, although at a way lower scale than both of them. All three of us had at some point as students bouts of patellofemoral pain syndrome. So right off the start, we were aligned with the project's topic. Furthermore, the topic of ongoing and persistent pain or knee pain for me really facilitated my interest in pain neuroscience education. And I've gone on to complete a specialty certification and just this year completed a fellowship in pain science. So selection of a topic was very helpful in not only a successful completion of the research requirement for the DPT degree, but also for the publication, obviously, and then the poster presentations that we were able to conduct at the American College of Sports Medicine and what was then the Physical Therapy Association of Georgia, which is now APTA of Georgia. We also wanted to make sure that we understand and commit to the project scope as students. On the next slide, I'm going to outline the details and milestones of the project. But as students, we really needed to understand and commit to the whole project scope because it spanned across different semesters from first year students to third year students and even beyond. And after that initial SRMA class, again, the project involved more than just course time devoted specifically to research. And so it was a multi-semester, multi-year commitment. And communication is key, not just among student project members, but we really had to take the initiative and accountability to keep our project going. In terms of project management, again, the project student and mentor meetings were really led by us as students. For instance, we learned the hard way that a deadline for research proposal submission is not the deadline that you need to submit to your mentors. You need to give your mentors way ahead of time to look at your work before you submit your proposal submission. And then it involved also ongoing meetings with our librarian, thankfully, who helped us with our literature search. Really first had to refine which databases would be specific enough for our topic and the field of physical therapy. We needed to learn how to use citation management software and really learn how to request full articles through interlibrary loan, etc. Next slide, please. And so as I mentioned, the timeline and milestones spanned all 3 years through the DPT program at Georgia State, beginning in semester 3 with that SRMA course. And through the course, we really, Dr. Warren helped us to really refine our question. And we conducted a preliminary search, as Dr. Galen mentioned, to establish feasibility of this actual question. And so semester 3, we were able to do a preliminary research search on this topic, where we had to search what's out there, right? We had to learn about recent research that focused on posterolateral hip strengthening, and then how do we compare that to, more traditional research focusing on knee extension at the time. And then we really had to finalize our protocol. And this involved refining our skills with that CMA software. So not only an introduction, but a deeper dive into that CMA software for statistical analysis, again, under guidance of Dr. Warren. And then again, we were able to begin our search for published studies. And we started out with over 280 studies. And then over the course of the semesters 4 and 5 from our first year into our second year, we really needed to dive deeper into refining the eligibility criteria, inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is where, again, we relied heavily on the librarian's help as we started to collect our data, beginning with those over 280 studies. We were able to exclude 126 studies, which were initially duplicates of that initial 280 studies, and then screen titles and abstracts of the remainder of the studies. From that, we were able to pool 22 studies for full testing of our inclusion criteria, which I mentioned earlier. Out of that full testing, we ended up with 9 studies for our meta-analysis. And then throughout, again, semesters 4 and 5 was really the onus on us to continue our mentor check-ins to make sure that our study variables were valid. Semesters 6 to 8, again, continuing with our mentor meetings with Dr. Morelli, getting more into content analysis and in depth there. And then diving deeper into data entry and data analysis, really looking closely at each study's objective measures, whether or not they looked at pain versus function of the knee, and then taking a fine-tooth comb to really help define treatment exercises according to the region of the hip. Most of all, we really relied on our mentors to help with making sure we were using the appropriate model for data analysis. We ended up using a random effects model for this meta-analysis. We also relied on them to help point us in the right direction when looking at variance between studies and any potential for looking at meta-analyses among the subgroups. And so going into semester 9 and beyond, this is when we started to prepare the report and really started to help each other with that technical writing, again, under the guidance of Dr. Warren and Dr. Morelli, and started with our proposal submissions. As I mentioned, we were able to go through to ACSM and APTA of Georgia, and submitted proposals, and were lucky enough to present our posters at these presentations. And so recommendations for as students, as SRMA investigators, really, again, I mentioned before, choosing a topic that is relevant and of personal interest will help to really continue that motivation from semester 3 onwards. And your choice of mentor, I think, again, we're lucky enough to be working with Dr. Morelli in consideration of her faculty interest there. And Dr. Warren was again, there with us from the beginning to the end to help us with data extraction, analysis, and the technical writing aspects of this. And in order to keep focus and not deviate from the actual research question, again, as students, you need clear communication and really taking the initiative to schedule and maintain those consistent meetings with your mentors and the librarian. And again, requires that accountability through all semesters. No one student took the lead. It was definitely a group effort. And with that, I'm going to transfer it over to Dr. Morelli.
Hi, everyone. So Dr. Nunez is making me smile and laugh all at the same time because she is definitely selling herself short. Number one, she's an amazing athlete, so don't let her fool you on that one. But number two, so driven, and Dr. Nunez, as well as Dr. Crelly and Dr. Smith, really took control of this project. I feel like they let me come in with them. They did an amazing job. I could only hope that everybody would have a student group that worked that hard. So it really is important that the students are invested in the topic and do contribute to the development of it. Otherwise, it can make that first bullet point a little bit difficult, whether or not you do a presentation or a publication. And as Dr. Nunez mentioned, they did both. From a timing standpoint, submission for presentations a lot of times has to happen a little bit early on before you really know how good your product may be. So they had submitted for presentations, and in the process of really getting through the systematic review and meta-analysis, we realized that they really actually had some good findings and had really done a nice job with, you know, the systematic review, the data analysis, that we felt it was good enough for a publication, and then went on to pursue that afterwards. So really, it's sort of the quality of the work that will determine whether or not you can get a publication out of a systematic review meta-analysis. It has to, in a sense, meet a certain standard. I think I have got 4 publications from student groups over, I would say, maybe 6 years. There've been a number that, in the process of doing them, we've gotten so far along that it's turned out that really, I'm not sure that we truly had the data that was needed or trusted all of the data extraction to be able to take it to the level of a publication. And if that's the case, you can't. Don't move forward if it's not to the minimum standard and it's not of good quality. The process of moving into that peer review publication does take time. And for this project, it did extend beyond their graduation, and they were kind enough to continue to work with me on that. And I really do truly appreciate that, because as you all know, in developing a manuscript, there's a lot more steps involved and a lot of editing and revisions that's necessary. And then the submission process tends to lead to more work after that. So you do have to be committed, and you do need support to do that. Just to sort of add on to what we've already been talking about, the process itself, you do need at least 2 individuals involved for data extraction and data analysis, because it does need to be done independently to confirm that it was in fact correct. And then a lot of times it helps to have a third reviewer to settle any disagreements that you may have in the data extraction process. In regards to how this research impacts clinical practice, if you think about a systematic review in and of itself, or a scoping review, you really are pulling all the evidence and talking about it, telling what each individual study may have found. It does get a tad subjective because it's going to be the author's interpretation, since there is no formal data analysis or statistical analysis performed in a systematic review. The meta-analysis takes it to the next step. It actually tells you, I apologize, I was pulling out my earbuds. It actually will analyze and tell you the relationship between the two variables. And then you, in a sense, can go back and look at each individual study and see where it falls in regards to that overall effect size or relationship between the two variables. Next slide, please. So when we talk about collaboration between faculty, when I joined Georgia State University in 2009, I came from full-time practice in the clinic when I joined academia. So I did not really have any experience in research except for what I had done in my graduate studies in physical therapy school. So I was a bit overwhelmed to join an R1 university, as well as the expectations the university had for myself and obviously all other faculty for future promotion. There are the standards by our accrediting body that we need to fulfill in regards to scholarship and research. So I was overwhelmed. I was very lucky to be able to partner with Dr. Warren on an active research project he had going on at the time. He is a distinguished faculty member at Georgia State University. He is phenomenal at research, both clinical research, active research, as well as a systematic review meta-analysis. And again, took me on. I can't thank him enough for that because I probably wouldn't have much, if any, scholarship without him getting me started. He gave me that push that I needed because it was very overwhelming. I know that some questions submitted were of that nature. How do you start as a clinical faculty member? And my advice is you have to have a senior faculty member, preferably I would say Tenure Track PhD that is willing to mentor you and take you on and assist you in that process. So I started with Dr. Warren on an active research project and then transitioned into assisting him with a systematic review meta-analysis that he had already started with his student group. And after completing that one is when I presented a topic, and Dr. Nunez, Dr. Corelli, and Dr. Smith showed interest in that topic and really took it on and made it their own and developing that clinical question. So as clinical faculty, I do have a high teaching load in the university assigned to me. Everybody's different at each university. One of the questions posed in the chat box was, I believe, let me see, I think it was teaching a load assigned if you take on student groups. It's assumed at our university that we are going to complete scholarship and research. So we are allotted a certain amount of percentage of our time devoted to research. So there are no course releases in taking on student groups, for example, at my university, because it's actually part of my expectations. So that's something that you'd want to talk about with your administration on how that would work out on taking on student groups. I highly recommend it though, because you need the manpower and assistance to really complete a good project. So in regards to identifying a topic, I have things that I'm interested in, but I also really advise that you let the students help you develop that topic in question, because if they're not invested, it just doesn't work well. It's hard to get to that end product. I have really pushed a few student groups over the past couple of years just to get some presentations completed so that they fulfilled the research requirements within our program. So you need student buy-in. So I think it needs to be a collaborative effort between the faculty and students in coming up with the topic. Or if you're partnering with a clinician in the community or another faculty member, again, you both have to be interested in the topic to really be able to complete it and follow through with it. We select students because it's required within our program, but we've also had outside students come in as well that have asked to be a part of these projects. Next slide, please. So in regards to resources needed, again, you do need a technical expert. I myself did take Dr. Warren's course at Georgia State University, as well as an online course. I still would not call myself the expert because I always fall back on Dr. Warren to make sure if I have specific questions, because again, my background is clinical in nature. So I do still rely heavily on the statistical expert to make sure that we're not missing any things. And as well, Dr. Nunez, Dr. Galen both mentioned the librarian. A really good librarian can really help you with that systematic review portion of the project. You do need to develop a schedule. We have an example of an outline of a schedule over about a 1.5 year, 2 year time period to complete a good product. But you need to write it down in a calendar, stick with it, follow through with it, and have multiple meetings to make sure everybody's on track. And then in collaboration with clinicians, I would highly recommend that, again, that you have that technical expert or involved with clinicians, as opposed to just clinicians serving as the content expert. Because again, there's some little nuances with the data analysis process or data extraction process that can come up. I'm working on a project right now that some students had been or are doing with a clinician, and I got pulled into it. And in the process of looking at it, the data is pretty inconsistently reported within each of the studies, and it's going to make it really difficult to be able to extract it and consistently be able to analyze it and come up with an effect size. So you really do need that technical expert to be sure that you have everything that you need to actually complete the meta-analysis portion there. And then next slide. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Galen to wrap us up here with opportunities and challenges.
Thank you, Dr. Morelli and Dr. Nunez. Before closing, I just want to emphasize that the systematic review and analysis program really has to be happening over at least 2 years. That's the minimum amount of time that our students and our faculty work as a team together to get it completed. So if you're thinking of setting up a program, make sure that it starts early in the DPD program so they have plenty of time to get it completed. In spite of that, still we may have a bit of an overflow sometime, but that's as long as they meet the requirements, we keep them progressing. And I think there was a question about workload, and Dr. Morelli has already answered. As a Research One university, all of our faculty in our department are expected, both clinical faculty as well as tenure and tenure track faculty are expected to be engaged in research, and that is considered part of their workload. And so they do not get any specific course releases. But one thing I can tell you, we work as a team together. So we don't kind of, there's nobody doing things on their own pretty much. We all kind of combine or collaborate together to make it easier for each other between the clinical content experts and the technical expert, if you like. So that's where the dialogue between faculty is extremely important. We have research meetings in our department. We're in the process of setting up more journal clubs within our department as well to get to know what each of us are doing in our specific areas and see if there are more collaborations that can be done. And we also do this at the college level so we can collaborate with other programs and other units within our college, like with nursing or occupational therapy and others. So it's a very vibrant program of different individuals coming together to make this happen. And finally, for student success, we do have a plan or like a template that all of our students have to fill in at the beginning of every semester. So for example, at the very first semester, they might say, the goal of this semester for us is to complete our PICO question, get our search going, and get a few articles identified. At the end of the semester, if they meet the goal, they just tick the box, they get moved on from there. If they do not, then they give us a plan, how they're going to progress further. So the student success is very closely monitored throughout the 2-year period. It's not like, here you go, here's your project, and we see you at the end of the semester. There's very frequent meetings. It's extremely important to make this process to move forward smoothly. So some of that are what I would say are challenges, but also brings excellent opportunities for us to move on. So with that, this is a final slide. It'll be there in our contact as well. These are all our email. Especially if you're interested in the program, do reach out to us. We'll be very happy to share with you resources, but also you are welcome to participate in the systematic review course that Dr. Warren teaches in our program. And with that, I am going to stop sharing the slide and open up the forum for questions and discussion. If you have a question, please unmute your mic and you can speak.
Good evening, Dr. Galen. My name is Amy Klein. I'm a professor at the University of South Florida in Tampa, and we actually do systematic reviews as part of our scientific inquiry sequence. Very different than you do. We do it in about 6 months over a course of 2 semesters with a summer in between. that we try to get the students engaged. I guess my question to you, and I put it earlier, even though you talked about a scoping review, is the reason that you guys don't consider a scoping review because you can't do a full meta-analysis with it, because there is some value in scoping reviews, especially in areas where there's limited research, and especially in those groups where you have them going on to PhD, which may be able to then fund them in a way that they may build upon their scoping review. So are there opportunities perhaps where a scoping review, for those that I'm aware of in a scoping review, is individuals that are questions that don't have adequate evidence, typically 5 to 6 research studies that would follow their inclusion criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klein, for your question. And without having to repeat, yes, in some instances, at least like Dr. Morelli's example, we have considered moving off that, but absolutely. I mean, this is something we are still in the process, if you like, depending on the topic that's chosen, that we could go into scoping. Personally, I have done some myself, but I will also open it up to my panel to say if they have been engaged in any of that and what their perspective is as well.
I actually had, with another faculty member, we ended up doing a systematic review, and we never were able to take it to the meta-analysis level. So it did start that way, and we did actually publish that paper. And one of the projects I'm currently working on, I think we're going to have to direct it that way, as opposed to being able to take it to the meta-analysis level. So I'm absolutely never opposed to it. But if we can, we're trying to get students to take it to the level of a meta-analysis. For me, I like a meta-analysis in regards to a publication because it's very, there's definitely a format to it. It's a step-by-step process. So it's nice that you can kind of follow an outline, and you know you're always going to complete these certain steps. So it does help that person that's a little bit type A and organized, that has a little bit harder time, which I do sometimes, just going with the flow.
While I'm waiting for the next question, there are some on the chat. I think Dr. Fisher was asking about a Excel template. Yes, we do have one. I will ask Dr. Warren about sharing that, but it's a very straightforward template where we have a tab with all of the studies, and then a second tab where we look at outcome measures, and in terms of what outcome measures are going to be included in the meta-analysis. And so, yeah, and the answer to your question is yes, we will be able to share that as part of the packet. And Dr. Warren, would you like to add anything to what I said about that Excel template?
No, it's not it's probably not relevant. Yeah, it's going to be, it's very specific to the research question. So yeah, I don't think would be useful to someone else that's not looking at our topic.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. And so, yeah, with every research question, sometimes like if it's more kind of looking at behavioral type research, the template doesn't apply itself or lend itself in that way. So we have to tweak it. But the essence of it is that we have all of the studies listed, if you like, and from there we go outcome measure by outcome measure. And that's essentially what that template really is.
If I can remember the
Sure.
template correctly, it also left room for student assignment. So it was clear as to who was doing what in the group.
Thank you, Dr. Nunez. There was a question from Dr. Faris about how many student groups does a faculty member work with at any given time? Excellent question. So again, we do not very much count the numbers, but it's about, I would say, 2 to maybe 3 groups. And that is depending on where each of those groups are. So for example, I may have 1 group in the final year DPT, but 2 groups in the following year after that. So we try our best to distribute it as evenly as we can. In other words, no one faculty is taking many groups. The only exception is Dr. Warren is the technical advisor pretty much for all of the meta-analysis groups. So if we have 5 to 6 in each group, that multiplied by 3, that's about 15 at a time. So he's got pretty heavy load in that way. Dr. Morelli or Dr. Warren, would you like to add anything to that?
That does sound about right from a student group perspective. So I have one active research project going on right now that has two different student groups within it because it's a second year and a third year group. So it's one project, two groups. They'll just get different assignments. And I believe I think 3 systematic review meta-analysis groups. So it changes year to year.
Thank you, Dr. Morelli. In terms of the CMA software, we do not have an institutional license. We only have about 3 departmental licenses that we purchase, and they're all installed in a computer lab. Yes, we do provide remote connections to our students so they can access remotely if they need to, especially during the pandemic. That's what we did. And some of our faculty do have their own licenses that the department funds for them. So that's the software side of it. And if you go to the website, you can see the license is about $495, I believe, for a year. You can do packages of more than 1 or 2 and multiple licenses as well. So I'm going on to the question from Dr. McCarty, who was curious about the timeline that we provide students for the systematic review development. The development part, if by which you mean developing a research question and search criteria, that, like Dr. Nunez mentioned, is pretty much at the very beginning of the program. It's the first, what we call the second, third semester to the 4th semester. That's where we limit it to, if you like. And then beyond that, it's pretty much data extraction, because at some point we'll have to draw the line and say, okay, we got that. Let's get going with the identifying the articles, removing the duplicates, extracting the data, because we need to move on with that. So with that, Dr. Nunez, would you like to add something to that on the timeline?
No, I think you've said it succinctly, Dr. Galen. Was there a specific timeline that you share through the SRMA course with the students? Is that what Dr. McCarty?
Yeah, the question was that of the development part of it is what I understand. It says, is there a timeline that you provide students for the systematic review part, that development of that? And can you share that timeline?
As Dr. Galen mentioned, it's really outlined in that SRMA course, and just mentioned going through the different semesters. It's going to be specific to your topic as well.
Thank you, Dr. Nunez. And that nicely takes on to the next question about the course and how do we teach it. The one in the spring where the students are taking the course, it's a 2-credit-hour course. So it goes through the entire spring semester from January through April. But the ones that the faculty and some of the external programs and PhD programs have taken is in the summer. And that's a 7-week program. And it's a 3-credit-hour course. So literally in 7 weeks in June and July is when the course is being taught. Right now, Dr. Warren is teaching it this summer as well. So it's a 7-week program. And we usually plan, or Dr. Warren plans the classes in the evening after about 3:30 in the evening. So it goes from 3:30 or 4 until about 7 p.m. in the evening.
And just to add to Dr. McCarty's question, we do have a sort of flow chart that outlines the process of the systematic review meta-analysis that was at the end of the PowerPoint that you'll have access to. I would say just in my experience in the course, spring semester of the student's first year, when they complete that course is when they basically know if their question's going to work or if it has to be changed. And then they go to clinic in the summer, and then they'll come back in the fall. So that fall of their second year is when, working with their faculty mentor, now they would refine the question and really complete the systematic review portion. So they have an entire semester to refine the question, complete the actual review, find every article that's out there, and then try to run through their inclusion exclusion criteria. And then that way in spring semester of their second year, now it's data extraction and double checking the data extraction and making sure they've pulled absolutely every variable that's in each article, because they may have to run moderator variables based on heterogeneity of the analysis. So you want all that done by end of their second year, so that third year is their presentations and or manuscript.
Thank you, Dr. Morelli. And when I have the time, I have to thank Jamil for posting that link to the recording. It'll appear in 1 to 2 weeks of the session. but also for all the technical help that is provided in setting this up. And also a big thanks to RIPPT and Consortium and ACAP for giving us the opportunity to present. We're not going to conclude the session. We still have about 9 or 10 minutes left. If there are any questions, anything else you'd like to ask, feel free to do so. Okay, hearing none, I'm sure it's an evening and you all want to get back to your families and have to your dinner and so on and so forth. I would strongly encourage you all to keep in touch with us. If you need any help with systematic review and meta-analysis, we are very collaborative and willing to help out any of the programs out there that may need assistance with that. We've already provided you with our email addresses. So before going, I would like to thank my panel this evening for giving their time and their expertise and talking about the program we have here at Georgia State University. Thanks to all of you for joining us this evening, and we'll hope to see you soon. Thank you and good night.